Have you ever prayed, waited, and still felt like nothing is happening? What if the door you've been praying for isn't the one God wants you to walk through? Why does it feel like the harder you try, the more things slip through your fingers? Could it be that God is not withholding something from you but guiding you towards something greater? This message will remind you God is never late. He's always working even in silence. Stay with us, and let these words from Billy Graham realign your faith and reignite your hope. My dear friend, today I want to remind you of this unshakable truth. God is always in control no matter what you're facing, no matter how many doors have been shut, no matter how uncertain the future feels. We try so hard to map out our lives. We make plans, set goals, and believe that with enough effort, things will go our way. But life often surprises us. Doors close, opportunities vanish, and the very things we prayed for don't unfold the way we hoped. In those moments, fear creeps in, and we start to question God. Why? Why didn't it happen? Why did you let this slip away? But here's the truth, God is still on his throne. What looks like a missed opportunity isn't a mistake, it's divine redirection. He sees what's ahead, what dangers lie beyond that closed door, and in his mercy, he gently steers us elsewhere. His no is never to harm, it's to protect, to guide, to prepare. We often resist this. We try to force open doors that were never meant for us. We exhaust ourselves trying to control what isn't ours to control. That's when we feel anxious, drained, overwhelmed. But Scripture says, "Be still and know that I am God." Psalm 46:10. Letting go of our need to control is the first step to peace. Fear won't open the right door. Worrying won't bring clarity. But when we surrender, when we say, "Lord, I don't understand, but I trust you," that's when God begins to move. That's when he opens doors we didn't even know existed. So if everything feels out of control right now, hold on to this. God has never lost control. Your world may shake, but he remains steady. Your plans may fail, but his purpose stands. Proverbs 3:5-6 reminds us, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. And he will make your path straight." You don't have to know how things will unfold. You just have to trust the one who does. The same God who created the heavens holds your life in his hands. Every closed door is leading you closer to the one he's prepared just for you. We've seen how a closed door may not be rejection but protection. Now, let's take a closer look at why those shut doors could be one of the greatest acts of love from God. There are moments when we stand before a door, praying and hoping it will open. We believe, we persist, we pour out our hearts. And yet nothing happens. The door stays firmly shut. In those moments, it's easy to feel rejected, forgotten, or abandoned. But what if that closed door isn't a sign of God ignoring you but of him guiding you? You see, when God closes a door, it's never without purpose. It's not punishment, it's redirection. A closed door might be saving you from heartbreak, danger, or long-term pain that only God can see. That job you didn't get, that relationship that ended, that path that didn't work out, they all may have looked perfect from your perspective. But God, who sees beyond the surface, knew what lay ahead. And because he loves you, he intervened. We often become frustrated, trying to pry open doors not meant for us. We resist, we push, we beg for what we think is best. But what looks like a setback is often a setup for something greater. God isn't taking something away, he's making space for something better. What you thought was a missed opportunity may actually be divine protection. Think back to moments in your life when you desperately wanted something, but later realized it wasn't right for you. Maybe that closed door helped you avoid pain, or led you somewhere even better. Looking back, it all makes sense, because his thoughts are higher than ours. As Isaiah 55:8-9 says, "My thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord." Even when it feels unfair, Even when the waiting is painful, He is working. He's not done, and the door He does open no one can shut. There's power in trusting God when things don't make sense. It takes faith to walk away from a closed door and believe something better is ahead. The enemy wants you to feel forgotten when things fall apart, but God is always aligning your life with His perfect will. He's not withholding, He's preparing. So the next time a door closes, don't ask, "Why me?" Instead, ask, "God, what are you preparing me for?" Because when you begin to see closed doors as blessings, everything changes. And that shift in perspective, it's where breakthrough begins. Next, let's uncover how trusting God, especially in moments of fear and doubt, can completely change your journey. Sometimes, what God asks of us most at a closed door is trust. Trust when we're afraid. Trust when we don't understand. Trust when it feels like He's silent. Fear is one of the enemy's most powerful weapons. It sneaks in with whispers, "What if this never works out? What if God doesn't come through?" Fear magnifies our problems, clouds our judgment, and robs our peace. But fear doesn't come from God. As 2 Timothy 1-7 reminds us, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. Fear will paralyze you. It will keep you stuck, anxious, second-guessing everything. But faith does the opposite. Faith reminds you that God is bigger than anything you're facing. It says, "Even if I can't see the way, I trust the one who leads me." Look at Peter walking on water. As long as he kept his eyes on Jesus, he did the impossible. But the moment he focused on the storm, he began to sink. That's what fear does. It shifts your focus from the Savior to the storm. Faith doesn't ignore the reality of the storm. It chooses to believe despite it. It declares, "My God is greater." It doesn't wait for perfect conditions to move its steps forward even when the path isn't clear. Think of the Red Sea parting, David facing Goliath, the walls of Jericho falling. None of it happened because people were fearless. It happened because they chose faith over fear. They trusted God's power over their circumstances. You face the same choice, fear or faith. One will always push the other out. The enemy wants to fill your heart with doubt, anxiety, and confusion. But when you walk by faith, you shift the battle. You stop trying to fight in your own strength, and you start letting God lead the way. Because when fear loses its grip, faith takes over. And when faith takes over, nothing can stop what God is about to do. Next, we'll look at what might be the hardest part of all: when you've prayed, waited, and believed, but nothing seems to happen. What do you do in the waiting? Faith can overcome fear, but what happens when you've done everything right, and still, nothing seems to happen? You've prayed, you've believed, you've waited, but the door remains shut. And as the days stretch into weeks, and weeks into years, the silence starts to feel unbearable. You watch others stepping into blessings while you're still waiting on a breakthrough, and you wonder, "God, when will it be my turn?" Waiting is one of the hardest things God asks of us. It tests our patience, our trust, and our willingness to surrender. We live in a world that craves instant results, but God doesn't operate on our timeline. He's never early, never late. His timing is perfect. What we see as delay, God sees as preparation. He's not ignoring your prayers, He's shaping you for the promise. Behind the scenes, He's aligning people, circumstances, and even your own heart for what's coming next. Think of Joseph. God gave him a dream, yet he spent years in slavery and prison before the promise was fulfilled. But none of that time was wasted. Every setback prepared him for the palace. In one moment, his life shifted and it all made sense. Or Abraham, God promised him a child, but decades passed before Isaac was born. Their wait felt endless, but when the time was right, the miracle came. You see, when you're waiting, God is working. He's not just preparing the blessing, He's preparing you. If he gave it to you too soon, you might not be ready to carry it. Ecclesiastes 3:11 says, "He has made everything beautiful in its time." That includes your story. So if you're in a season of waiting, don't rush the process. Don't force doors open. Trust that God's delay is not his denial. When the appointed time comes, nothing will stop what he has planned. You won't have to chase it, his hand will bring it to pass. Now let's talk about how we discern the right door, especially in a world full of choices, confusion, and distractions that pull us in every direction. We've seen how God uses the waiting to prepare us. But in a world overflowing with options, how do we recognize the right door when it finally comes? Every day, we're faced with choices, some small, some life-changing. And while the world tells us to follow your heart or do what feels right, the truth is, our emotions can mislead us. Our understanding is limited. That's why we need God's guidance more than ever. Proverbs 3:5-6 says it clearly, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight." We're not meant to figure life out alone. It's not about asking God to bless the path we've already chosen. It's about surrendering our plans entirely and saying, "Lord, not my will, but yours." Seeking God's will requires humility. It means admitting we don't know what's best. It means letting go of our assumptions, our timelines, and even the things we desperately want. Why? Because he sees what we cannot. He knows the future. And he knows what will truly bless, not burden us. Too often, we chase what looks good in the moment, a promising job, an opportunity, a relationship that feels right. But not everything that glitters is from God. The enemy knows how to disguise traps as blessings. That's why discernment is crucial. When you consistently seek God through prayer, scripture, and quiet moments in his presence, he begins to shape your heart. He gently shifts your desires to align with his. You'll start to notice red flags sooner. You'll feel a holy hesitation where you once felt driven. Peace will guide your steps, not pressure. But if you're too focused on your own plans, if you're constantly trying to make things happen your way, you might miss his voice altogether. That's why seeking God's will isn't a one-time act. It's a daily decision to submit and follow. Sometimes God's will won't make sense right away. He may ask you to let go of something you were sure was right. He may ask you to wait longer than you wanted, or lead you down a road that feels uncertain, but his way is always better. So how do you stay aligned with God's will in a world that moves too fast? Let's take a deeper look at something many of us struggle with but rarely talk about: patience. When seeking God's will, one of the hardest lessons we face is learning to wait. And that brings us to something we often resist: patience. We live in a world of speed, instant messages, fast food, overnight delivery. Everything around us pushes the idea that if it doesn't happen quickly, something's wrong. But God's timing doesn't work like that. True, lasting things take time. Strong roots aren't grown overnight. A sturdy house needs a solid foundation, and God's promises are fulfilled not in our rush, but in his rhythm. There will be seasons where you pray, believe, and still nothing seems to change. Waiting can feel like wandering, and in that silence, it's tempting to question whether God has forgotten you. But delay is not denial. James 1:4 reminds us, "Let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing." Patience isn't about passively sitting still, it's about actively trusting that God is preparing both you and the promise. When we rush ahead of God, we often make decisions that lead to pain. Abraham and Sarah, in their impatience, tried to fulfill God's promise their own way, and it brought unnecessary struggle. But when they waited for God's timing, the true miracle, Isaac, was born. The same happens with us. Impatience leads us to settle, to take shortcuts, to carry burdens we were never meant to bear. But when we trust His timing, we grow, we are refined. We become stronger, wiser, and more rooted in faith. Think of David anointed as king, but forced to wait years before sitting on the throne. Or Joseph betrayed and imprisoned long before stepping into his destiny. Their waiting wasn't wasted, it was preparation. God doesn't just prepare the blessing, He prepares you to receive it. So if you're in a season of silence, know this: He hasn't forgotten you. He's not late. He's making sure that when the time comes, the door that opens will be one you're fully ready to walk through. But even as we wait and trust, there's a powerful tool we often overlook, one that invites heaven's help into every situation. Let's talk about prayer. We've talked about waiting patiently. But while you wait, there's something powerful you can do, something that shifts the atmosphere and invites God to move. Prayer is not just a routine. It's not empty words or a spiritual ritual. It's your lifeline to the Creator of the universe. When you pray, you're not speaking into the air, you're speaking directly to the God who holds all power, all wisdom, and all authority. Jesus said in Matthew 17:20, "If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move." Nothing will be impossible for you. That's the power of prayer. It doesn't depend on how big your problem is, it depends on how big your God is. There will be moments in life where the obstacles seem too large, the burden too heavy, or the battle too intense. The enemy wants you to believe nothing will change, that you're stuck, that your prayers are pointless. But that's a lie, because every time you pray, something happens. Even if you don't see it yet, even if it doesn't change overnight, God is always working behind the scenes. Think about Moses at the Red Sea, Joshua circling the walls of Jericho, Elijah calling down fire from heaven. None of those victories came from human strength. They came through prayer, obedience, and trust in God. Prayer isn't our last resort, it should be our first response. When fear creeps in, when the door stays closed, when the path isn't clear, that is the moment to pray. Because prayer brings heaven into your situation. Sometimes, God moves the mountain instantly. Other times, He gives you the strength to climb it. Either way, prayer changes you, your perspective, and your circumstances. The enemy trembles when a believer prays. Why? Because prayer activates the power of God. It breaks chains, restores peace, brings healing, and makes the impossible possible. So keep praying, keep believing. Even when it's hard, even when you feel like giving up. Your prayers are not in vain. Heaven hears you. But while prayer opens doors, there's something else that often holds us back, and it happens not outside, but inside of us. In the next part, let's talk about something that quietly steals peace and strength: fear. Prayer connects us to God's power, but fear tries to disconnect us from it. And unless we recognize fear for what it is, it can slowly take over our hearts. Fear whispers lies. What if you fail? What if things never change? What if God doesn't come through? It magnifies our problems and minimizes God's promises. And if left unchecked, it will cloud your mind, steal your peace, and paralyze your faith. But fear is not from God. 2 Timothy 1-7 reminds us, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind." Fear is the enemy's weapon, meant to distract, delay, and defeat you. Faith and fear cannot coexist. One will always drive the other out. When you choose faith, fear loses its grip. Faith says, even if I can't see the outcome, I know who holds the outcome. It declares, my God is greater than my fear, stronger than my situation, and faithful to fulfill His promises. Think of Peter walking on the water. As long as he looked at Jesus, he walked by faith. But the moment he looked at the wind, fear overtook him and he sank. That's exactly what happens to us when we shift our focus from God to our circumstances. Faith isn't pretending the storm doesn't exist. It's choosing to believe that God is bigger than the storm. It's holding on to peace when everything around you is shaking. It's walking forward when nothing around you makes sense. And make no mistake, the enemy will do everything he can to shake your faith. But when you stand firm and say, "I trust you, Lord," no matter what, something shifts. Heaven fights for you. Peace floods your soul. Clarity returns. And God begins to move in ways you didn't expect. Every major breakthrough in the Bible required faith in the face of fear, whether it was Moses standing before the Red Sea, David facing Goliath, or Joshua marching around Jericho. The same God who showed up for them will show up for you. But sometimes, even after the fear settles and the prayers continue, the door stays closed. What do you do when you've trusted, believed, and still see no change? Let's talk about what it means to wait well in God's timing. You've prayed, you've trusted, you've fought fear with faith, and yet, the door still hasn't opened. It's easy to wonder, what's taking so long? We look at others stepping into breakthroughs and quietly ask God, when will it be my turn? But here's the truth, God's timing is never random. It's intentional. Every delay has a purpose. Every moment of silence is filled with unseen movement. Ecclesiastes 3:11 says, "He has made everything beautiful in its time, not your time his." We often want things now. We're wired for instant results. But God is not in a rush. He sees the whole picture: your heart, your future, your readiness. What you think is a delay might actually be God protecting you, maturing you, and preparing the blessing so it doesn't overwhelm you when it comes. Look at Joseph. He had a dream, a calling, but instead of going straight to the palace, he was thrown into a pit, sold as a slave, and locked in prison. For years, it looked like God had forgotten him. But in one moment, the door opened and Joseph stepped into the promise. Every trial had prepared him for that moment. It's the same with Abraham. God promised him a child, but he had to wait years before Isaac was born. If Abraham had given up in year 10, he would have missed the miracle in year 20. Waiting isn't easy. It stretches you. It tests you. But it also shapes you. And what God is building in you during the waiting will become the strength you stand on when the promise arrives. Isaiah 60:22 says, "When the time is right, I, the Lord, will make it happen. You won't need to force it. You won't have to beg for it. When the appointed time comes, it will unfold with ease because it's God's hand opening the door." So don't let the silence discourage you. Don't mistake the delay for denial. God has not forgotten you. He's simply getting everything in place, including you. But knowing the door will open in God's time doesn't mean every open door is the right door. Next, we'll explore how to recognize whether that opportunity is from God or a distraction in disguise. Previously, we saw how her childhood was marked by an almost fateful encounter with dance, a spark that would never fade. But life wasn't always kind. Growing up in a modest household, she quickly understood that passion alone wouldn't put food on the table. Her family couldn't afford dance classes, and for a young girl full of dreams, that reality was crushing. Still, she didn't give up. Whenever music played, her feet would start to move. Alone in her small room, she'd mimic every step she saw on television, practicing tirelessly. At school, she became the girl who danced. Friends, teachers, even passers-by in the schoolyard often stopped to watch her improvise routines with a joy that was hard to ignore. She soaked up every chance to perform school events, festivals, anywhere with a stage, even if it was made of nothing more than concrete and chalk lines. When others rested, she danced. When others doubted, she believed. Though she lacked formal training, her heart pulsed with rhythm, and her movements spoke louder than words. And just when it seemed like dancing might remain a beautiful but distant dream, something changed. One afternoon, during a neighborhood event, her life took a sudden turn. A local choreographer happened to see her perform. Captivated by her natural grace, he approached her after the show and asked a simple question: "Who taught you to move like that?" She looked down, almost shyly. "I myself," she replied. That moment marked a new beginning. The choreographer offered to train her free of charge, moved by her potential and determination. It felt unreal, like a door opening after years of knocking in the dark. Training under him was no walk in the park. Her muscles ached. Her pride took hits. There were days she cried herself to sleep. But with every blister, every bruise, she grew stronger. She learned discipline. She learned to listen to her body, to control it, to speak through it. Weeks turned into months, and she began to blossom not just as a dancer, but as a performer. Her confidence grew. Her movements carried meaning. Her style became unmistakably hers, but was that enough to chase a professional career? Well, that question wouldn't stay unanswered for long. With each performance, her name began to circulate. Small shows turned into bigger invitations. Local competitions became stepping stones to national stages. People started to notice not just her talent, but her presence. There was something magnetic about the way she moved, something raw and honest. She wasn't just dancing, she was telling stories. But success, as it often does, came with its shadows. Whispers began to follow her, critics, comparisons, even envy. Some said she was too untrained. Others questioned whether her style fit the mold. Doors that looked promising sometimes shut without warning. Promises were made, then broken, and in quiet moments, doubts crept in. Was she truly meant for this? Yet no matter how loud the noise around her became, she returned to what she knew: the rhythm, the discipline, the purpose. She didn't dance to impress. She danced to express, and that became her anchor. Still, not every storm comes from the outside. Some begin within. As opportunities increased, so did the pressure. She started questioning herself, not just as a dancer, but as a person. Every stage felt heavier. Every misstep felt like failure. The more she chased perfection, the more distant peace became. She began noticing the toll: exhaustion, frustration, moments where joy felt like a memory. Behind the applause, she was silently burning out. But instead of collapsing, she paused. In the stillness, she began to reflect: why did I start dancing in the first place? Not for fame, not for praise, but because something inside her came alive when music played. That fire hadn't gone out, it had just been buried under expectation. So she shifted her focus, from proving to simply being, from chasing approval to rediscovering joy, from performing for others to dancing before God. And it was in that surrender that clarity returned. Yet, clarity alone doesn't make the path easy. Sometimes, the greater the calling, the fiercer the opposition. The road wasn't easy. It never is when you're walking toward a calling. But through every challenge, she learned that true strength isn't found in applause or approval, it's found in perseverance. In choosing to rise each time you fall, in holding on when everything in you wants to let go. There were moments when quitting seemed logical, when the setbacks felt too painful, too personal. But with every tear, she remembered the little girl who danced alone in her room, dreaming of something more. That girl didn't come this far to stop now. Over time, the criticism lost its power, the need for validation faded. And what remained was purpose, pure and unwavering. She danced not because she had something to prove, but because she had something to share. Her movement became a message that beauty can rise from brokenness, that dreams are worth the fight, and that calling isn't always comfortable, but it's always worth it. Now, when she steps onto the stage, she carries more than technique or talent. She carries testimony. Every movement whispers of resilience. Every step echoes with grace. She's not just dancing for herself anymore, she's dancing for everyone who's ever felt and seen, and heard, or underestimated. And maybe that's the point, because in a world that tells you to be perfect, she dares to be real. In a culture obsessed with speed, she chose to wait, to grow, to walk in purpose, even when the pace was slow. Her story reminds us, you don't need the world's approval to walk in what God has already approved. Your worth isn't measured by how quickly doors open but by how faithfully you wait, grow, and trust in the one who opens them. So if you're in the waiting ... keep going. If the doors haven't opened yet ... stay faithful. If the noise around you grows loud, return to your center. You are not forgotten. You are not behind. You are being prepared. And when your moment comes, when the light hits the stage, when the music begins, when your soul finally finds its rhythm again, you'll realize every delay had purpose, every detour held a lesson, and every step, no matter how heavy, was leading you exactly where you were meant to be. So dance, not for perfection, not for applause, but because you were made to. And that is more than enough. The door will open in His time, not yours. Until then, walk by faith, not by sight. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs hope today. You're not forgotten, you're being prepared. And when God opens that door ... nothing will be able to shut it. God bless you.